Welcome back, everybody. Now, the past Tuesday, matric results were released, and so many education experts acknowledged the improvements in the national pass rate, even though they cautioned that the figures might not fully reflect the reality of the education system in South Africa. So, as we navigate an ever-evolving job market, the question of how well our education system prepares students for future employment opportunities is more relevant than ever. We now joined via video link by education expert and professor of practice at the University of Johannesburg, Professor Metcalfe, to discuss the critical topic of skills development and the future job market. We'll also explore just how the education systems at both the primary, secondary and tertiary levels equip students with the necessary skills to succeed in the rapidly changing world of work. Prof, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you, Simpiwe. Good to be with you.
It's an absolute pleasure having you join us this morning, Prof. Now, as a starting point, how do you define skills development in the context of modern education? Or put simply, what key skills do you think students will need the most in the future job market, and how do these compare to those required today?
Well, Simpiwe, I want to stress that often people make a very simple assumption that skills will in themselves lead to employment. Now, there's obviously a very clear relationship between the kinds of skills needed in the economy and the opportunity to develop those skills. But we also have to be very conscious that we do not have a labor-absorbing economy. And what that means is that we need to not have a simplistic one-to-one assumption that having a skill will lead to employment, but we need to also look at the role of a whole range of social competencies and creative thinking and ways of interacting socially and being creative and productive in working collaboratively with colleagues. That should be taught in the 10 years of compulsory education. If we had learners who are socially aware, who have a sense of what it means to contribute in a working environment, who at the end of grade 10 are then confident to be able to move into the various pathways that are possible after grade 10. I think that we would both be able to have a solid base for skills, for participation in society, and for some creative thinking about the range of possibilities. At the moment, we've got a single track focus as a country. If only I can get to university, if only I can get a degree. And I don't think that that is taking into account the breadth of challenges and the breadth of opportunities that we need to create.
True. I'm actually quite enchanted by the point that you made earlier on, that we don't have a labor-absorbent economy. And having said that, Prof, how then does the education system currently prioritize skills development, and in which areas do you think it's falling short?
Good. For me, one of the big challenges that we face is that we have a compulsory education system for 10 years now that takes people up until the end of grade 9. That's 10 years of compulsory education, which should end with what they call the general education certificate. That has still to be put into place by the Department of Education. But after grade 10 and the general education certificate, which should give guidance as to pathways, the range of options are much broader. It includes universities, it includes TVET colleges, and it should include the the need for a bigger community college system. That should be as large as universities, if not larger. Now, the skills within that need to be linked to the demands of the workplace, the demands of industry, the demands of development. What we've got to avoid with having a Department of Higher Education separate from basic education is costly duplication of the same courses and qualifications in the DBE and DHET. We need DHET to focus much more on quality in TVET colleges with a range of skills that are offered there, expansion of the community colleges, and DBE, I believe, should not be introducing new subjects which can be pursued in those institutions because, as everybody's aware at this stage of the year, we do not have resources that we should not be wasting resources. We're in a financially constrained environment, and we've got to be much more selective about what we do with our limited resources so that as many learners as possible are able to access opportunities. And if we look at the number of young people who are not in education, not in employment, and not in training, the number of those learners between the ages of 15 and, young people, between the ages of 15 and 24 is 3.6 or 3 to 3.7 million young people. It's 35% of that age group. Those young people must not feel that they have no future, that there is no chance to participate. And that's why the skills opportunity in the community college sector and in the TVET sector need to be quality, accessible, and we need to accommodate many more young people.
Yeah, and I want us to focus more on the community element because I've observed with concern over the last decade or so that employers and industry leaders are not so intensively involved in the development of educational curricula. Are there any best practices perhaps for involving them effectively?
I believe we have the framework for best practices and we need to make them work better. So one of the first laws that was passed in the first 5 years of government was the National Skills Act. That provided for sectoral education training authorities, which brings together labor, business, government, and community. And those sectors would, for example, include transport, construction, and all of the sectors of the economy. Those sectoral educational training authorities, called SETAs, their primary responsibility is to understand the economic trajectory of that sector, the skills requirements in that sector, and they should be working closely with the providers of education and training to orientate the content, the curriculum, the opportunities, the numbers towards what we anticipate to be areas of economic growth.
And how can educational institutions create stronger partnerships with industries to sort of ensure that students gain the relevant experience and exposure to real-world job requirements?
Absolutely a critical question. Again, the SETAs have a critical role to play. But the history of technical and vocational education and the most effective forms of technical vocational education is not just in the classroom and in the lecture room. It requires work-based experience. So the relationship between community colleges, TVETs, and local employers, local industry needs to be aggressively pursued by the TVET college and the community colleges when they come online more. That requires hard work, but it is absolutely essential. There are many TVET colleges which are showing best practice, and those need to be encouraged. I think the TVET colleges have gone through such a massive period of restructuring, repositioning, new curricula, that we have to now focus on stabilization, quality, and above all, making sure that the lecturers are confident and willing and able to support young people. At the moment, it's hard work being in a TVET college.
You know, Prof, I've observed your journey in the education space for quite a while now. I mean, you wear so many hats. You're an educator, you're an academic, and you played in the political space at some point, being the inaugural Gauteng Education MEC. So with your broad-based knowledge of South Africa's education sector, can you perhaps give us examples of any programs or initiatives that have successfully aligned curriculum development with industry needs?
In the TVET sector over the last 10 or 15 years, there have been some really groundbreaking initiatives. When you talk about my multiple hats, I always smile because I think I've been privileged to have broad experience but thin. So I've got an understanding of a broad range of issues, but not always the depth. Now, the TVET colleges, that is where we need to be able to look at the innovations and look at them in detail. And that is a question worth pursuing and to bring the appropriate expertise in.
And with the rise of automation and artificial intelligence, do you think there will be significant shifts in the types of skills needed by workers? And how should educational institutions prepare students for these changes?
I love that question because, sometimes there's a push to say 21st century skills are something different. Now, there are needs for perhaps greater understanding of a workplace that has high levels of information technology. But I don't think that it means that we have to have a simple notion of teaching, for example, robotics, because as AI develops, as technology develops, those kinds of skills get rapidly outdated. So what we need, I think, particularly from the 10 years of basic education, is the ability to reason, to read confidently, to sift information, to be able to use mathematics appropriately, to be able to collaborate. So I'm always a little skeptical of a push to say it's a new world, therefore people must just learn IT. No, IT is going to change. They need the ability to learn to think critically, to adapt, to be confident in approaching new information.
All right, Prof, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for joining us, and we do appreciate your time.
Thank you, Simpiwe.
Well, thank you. Well, Professor Mary Metcalfe, an education expert and professor of practice at the University of Johannesburg, just exploring both the theoretical and the practical aspects of skills development within the educational framework and how well it aligns with the demands of an ever-evolving job market.